Welcome back, everybody. We have got the big apology and the explainer of what has went on from Overwatch 2's director. It's quite an interesting situation, given my sort of past covering a lot of Blizzard games, a little bit of the insidery things that I have heard. It certainly does sound like a very old-school Blizzard-like problem, and there's quite a lot that we've got to talk about in addition to what has been said. So, what if I told you that Overwatch 1 was never meant to be a live service? It was just a game that they put out, and yeah, they were going to support it a bit, and there was the loot boxes you could buy, but that was evidently not the full intent. No. It instead was supposed to be a springboard, part of a 3-point plan to resurrect one of Blizzard's largest failures, and that failure is Project Titan. Now, Project Titan is one of Blizzard's many failed projects. We can talk about a few of them. There's currently a number of mobile games that are lying in the graveyard. Go back far enough, you will find the likes of Warcraft Adventures. Yeah, if you want to see Thrall curving up some, I don't know, crazy snowboarding. There's even a snowboarding thing in that came out recently, which was a bit weird. But that was basically the story that was later turned into the book that Christie Golden did that set up the Horde in the Warcraft setting. So that's a notable cancelled Blizzard project. We have StarCraft Ghost. Project Titan, then, is a fascinating story, one that started off as the true successor to World of Warcraft, because Blizzard did not have faith that World of Warcraft would last as long as it has. Therefore, a lot of top talent, the people who made Azeroth really what we kind of would, well, really come to know it as today, they moved to Titan. There are other large-scale projects in that Blizzard recycling bin as well. As an example, a Battlefield-esque shooter was actually in development, and it too is a project that was eaten up by Overwatch 2 PvE, at least if my sources are to be believed, and given that I then heard the story from, I think it was Kotaku that broke it, on the StarCraft, in the big StarCraft shooter that they killed, yeah, I've got to imagine that what I heard about that is true. So, it's a fascinating story. Let's take a look and also see what the actual future is for Overwatch 2. What do they got planned in replacement? Of course, with the help of today's sponsor. Data. The world is data these days. It's so important. Those who can think through data in their head will be powerful. If you can nail probabilities in like the complex ways, you'll be super powered. So get started with the basics of data science, where you will learn the key concepts, and then you can progress on to the more advanced topics like applying probability. And what I love is how they keep it fun and fresh. It's all with interactive examples, fun analogies, and an approach where not knowing something is okay because they are so good at actually explaining the working out. And I think this is key because the modern world, it bamboozles us with numbers. You just, charts, numbers, they're thrown at you left, right, and center, and even if you're not gunning for a job, I think that having these mental tools will just come in useful everywhere, and that'll be good. They're the best place to invest in is yourself. And with Brilliant, you can learn by doing at your own pace across the web and their brilliant app. So get started now. The first 200 to click my link, brilliant.org/Bellular News, get 20% off an annual plan. And of course, you've got that delicious 30-day free trial. So big thanks to them. They're awesome. They help us do what we do. Now let's get into it. Number one, the statement from Aaron Keller. The Overwatch team was founded in the wake of a cancelled game at Blizzard called Project Titan. It had many facets, but at its heart, it was a FPS MMO. The Overwatch team, especially at its inception, considered itself an MMO development team. This is hardly a surprise. Jeff Kaplan, as an example, was one of the more senior designers on World of Warcraft. He was also pretty big into, shooter games, right? Played loads of them as well. So, as we transitioned away from the original concept and started creating Overwatch, now remember, Overwatch is basically just recovering stuff from the fallen game concept that was Project Titan, but characters like Torbjorn and Tracer, they actually existed from Project Titan, right? And Titan was really just shaped into it. It wasn't really like a clean break from our understanding. Now, they included plans to one day return to the scope of Titan. It was a crawl, walk, run plan, where Overwatch was the crawl, a dedicated version of PvE was the walk, and MMO was the run. So imagine, I suppose, if Destiny 2 started off as a Halo-inspired shooter, and then PvE came into it, and then at some point they wanted to make a transition to a full MMORPG. You can sort of think about it in those terms. This apparently was built into the very DNA of the Overwatch development team, and they essentially saw the end goal. They saw the final form as being the realization of Project Titan. Really, Project Titan, it never really died. We launched Overwatch in 2016. We quickly started talking about what was next, what the next iteration could be. Looking back at that moment, it's obvious that we weren't as focused as we should have been on the game that was a runaway hit. You see, that's the thing. Blizzard has never been an agile company, right? As much as Blizzard were pioneers of games as a service, it is just not really the way that they built games. It's not the way that they shipped. In Blizzard, the game developers were the rock stars. In this case, the game developers had their goal of the next thing that they wanted to make. You could almost argue that if business interests had more power at that time, then maybe they would have said, that's very risky. Let's compete with Counter-Strike, League of Legends, and Dota right now with our runaway hit game that's taken the world by storm. You have to look at the path not taken, and I imagine that is precisely what the Overwatch team are thinking about right now. Keller continues, instead, we stayed focused on a plan that was years old. Work began on the PvE portion of the game, and we steadily continued shifting more and more of the team to work on those features. As an example, a lot of the skins that came out for Overwatch 1, those were outsourced to other studios. Yes, in many cases, they were led by concept artists internally at Blizzard, but that just goes to show, and by the way, that's something that I heard from a source that I do trust, that I think speaks to how allocated they were. But one thing that is never mentioned here, that I think Keller is quite obviously not able to mention, is the Overwatch League. From what I understand, the Overwatch League was a little bit of a time vampire, sucked away some focus. Obviously, the Overwatch League was very important to Activision Blizzard in terms of their big kind of like macro strategy. They were having team buy-ins that were... it was really all modeled after the NFL, right? American football. It was modeled on that business. Teams had humongous buy-in prices to actually get into this league. So not only do you have PvE, but you then have this wild situation where even though there is never a plan to support Overwatch 1 fully as a live service, they still want to reap all the benefits of that and have Overwatch as an esport that can compete with the likes of League of Legends and Dota, which of course is something that you're not going to be able to do if you can't ship in the same way that, say, Riot does. So, very, very bizarre. I think you can see that there are multiple interests that are all competing with each other in a detrimental fashion here. So, Keller says, things rarely go as planned in game dev. We struggled to find our footing with the hero mission experience early on. Scope grew. We were trying too many things at once and we lost focus. The team built some really great things, including hero talents, new enemy units, and early versions of missions, but we were never able to bring together all the elements needed to ship a polished, cohesive experience. From what I understand, you take some sort of sliding bar between Overwatch PvE as it was and, your Left 4 Deads and your Destinies, and just like, how much detail are we going to get? How close will it be until the dreaded appearance of gear arrives, which I suppose probably would have been a thing reserved for the MMO. One would hope at the very least. Now, we had an exciting but gargantuan vision, and we were continuously pulling resources away from the live game in an attempt to realize it. I can't help but look back on our original ambitions for Overwatch and feel like we used the slogan crawl, walk, run to continue the march forward with a strategy that just wasn't working. And that is the thing. When you are very, very, very developers first, we're successful, you don't have humongous financial pressure to ship right now, then you can start to fall prey to things like rationalizations. You're like, my brain feels really not at ease with how things are going. It will come up with a rationalization to make itself feel okay. That way, me, the owner of the brain, doesn't need to contend with the harsh reality that is subconsciously making me very anxious, right? That's the mistake we all make all the time. It's just unavoidable. It's part of the human experience. And it's really hard when it happens in a team like this. And I think as a leader, it's one of the things that you've got to be absolutely the most focused on, because your lack of vision, your lack of direction, right? Your lack of an ability to bring things to a shippable state, that is eating years of your colleagues' professional life. And that is why the burden of leadership truly is massive, and it needs to be respected. You cannot just take a devs, we will realize our vision in a sort of Ken Levine way. You can't do that too much, because actually you're just pissing other people's creative lives into the river. And that's not a good thing. We announced something audacious. This is talking about 2019, BlizzCon. Our players had high expectations. We no longer felt like we could deliver. We needed to make an incredibly difficult decision. We knew it disappointed the players, the team, and everyone looking forward to hero missions. They say they understand this deeply, that for them it was years of work and emotional investment. And yeah, it is what it is. Okay, so then he says, lastly, people have wondered why the announcement came at this time. After Overwatch 2 launched, we started refining our plans for future seasons. As those plans grew, we tried to find all the ways to make our ambitions fit together in a plan we believed in, and they simply couldn't. I believe our current understanding is that it is late 2022 when this core final decision gets made. Now, I want you to cast your mind back to late 2022. That's when Overwatch 2 has been out of its live open beta weird thingy, and people are beginning to be critical of the season. They're going to be, they're being critical of the shop, right? They're being critical of the way in which content is deployed, the amount of skins available via gameplay, right? The community is beginning to hold Blizzard's feet to the fire. And amidst that backdrop, they're still trying to basically make a backdoor pilot for a full MMORPG. So he says that they just realized they could not go back to pulling people away from the live game in service of their original vision. Because especially if they're doing this in the context of a live service that underdelivers will die. Cough, cough, Halo Infinite, cough, cough. So, he says, they cut the hero missions and they started planning for the future. And ultimately, he takes a degree of responsibility for this, saying, in this case, I had trouble pivoting away from a vision that just wasn't working, and for that, I would like to apologize to our players and to our team. I'm sorry. Now, this is him speaking as game director. A lot of people will say, but what about Pappy Jeff? What about Jeff Kaplan? We all love him so much. Did he have anything to do with this? And the answer is, we obviously do not know. However, when you think about the timing, you think about the way that he is talking about this, it very much does appear to be the case that the final decision was made in the post-Kaplan era. Why did Kaplan leave? We do not know. Too much speculation there is dangerous, unhelpful, and misleading. I think there are many things that you could maybe call sort of reasonable speculative theories. Could it be that Jeff is very married to the original vision? After all, he was working on Project Titan for a long time. Didn't he move off WoW during the Burning Crusade? Right? And then it was on to Titan? So that is a long time. Maybe he doesn't want to make those changes. Or maybe it's a case that he's trying to make PvE happen, but he feels like he's trying to insulate his team from a lot of Activision Blizzard bullshit, and perhaps he just ends up being like, shit, man, we're pulled in so many directions, so much bullshit at the company, I'm out of here. Maybe it's like that. You can't speculate too much, though. It's not particularly helpful. Now, they say we're focusing our efforts into making the game an ever-evolving experience. They're committed to building many of the elements they talked about at BlizzCon 2019, including the story missions that delve into the next chapter of the Overwatch universe, new types of co-op content they have not shared, new stories that they're planning to tell in and out of the game, and all of that. And he just ends by saying that, Overwatch came out of the ashes of Titan. The future of Overwatch will come out of the ashes of our current situation. Now, when you then hit up, this is a thread from an Overwatch League commentator. One of the major takeaways from the blog post is confirmation the original direction post-launch was to develop away from a PvP game and into an MMO, like with Titan. Feels like Blizzard lost sight of what made Overwatch a cultural phenomenon, in 2016. I get the feeling Jeff Kaplan followed the pipeline of what was standard at the time for delivering a full game and then moving on to making a sequel. If I recall correctly, work in Overwatch 2 began as early as 2017, so it's clear to me that supporting Overwatch 1 as a real live service was never really the long-term vision. So yeah, from 2017 to 2022, 5 years. But from what we understand, the Overwatch 2 that we actually got that was turned around very, very, very quickly. So you're at least looking at 3 to 4 years of work that's just kind of, gone. On the bright side, though, there are some things that they will get from the ashes of this project. Narrative design work, missions, development tools, engine upgrades, things that likely will stand to the future of the game. Overall, then, it's a very interesting thing from Blizzard. Project Titan has damaged a lot. It's also, from what I understand, quite damaged World of Warcraft. I've heard it a few times on the grapevine, and, I do hear things on the grapevine. Think about what my other channel is. I've heard a lot of things in the grapevine that World of Warcraft was quite underinvested in for quite a lot of time. I think about the humongous content droughts that World of Warcraft has had. I think about how long some issues have persisted in World of Warcraft. Again, some of that you can see as underinvestment. I think some of that you can see as a very headstrong Blizzard attitude, which for us in World of Warcraft meant that very well-meaning player feedback was not acted on for years upon years upon years upon years. But I think in a situation like Project Titan also meant that the reasonable thing to do with Overwatch, that just wasn't acted on because they had a very headstrong, we know best, developers or rock stars attitude to shipping instead of being a little bit more player first, where you would have thought, okay, well, look at this runaway hit, we have to change our plans. So it's something that honestly hurt World of Warcraft quite a lot from what I understand, because World of Warcraft was not seen as a game that really could last as long as it has, and they were really trying to make Project Titan because they wanted that to be the true, the future cash cow, the next big thing. And overall that just caused quite a lot of chaos, quite a lot of lost time at the company. Of course, then, as I mentioned at the top, we have the Battlefield-esque StarCraft game. From my source, this is maybe 3 years ago now, or maybe it was 4, I don't know, 3 years ago, whatever. From my source, it was friggin' sweet and looked really cool, but ultimately it died so that more development work could go onto Overwatch 2 PvE because it just needed more developers. Okay, so that's a little bit of this direct news from them, a little bit of a chat about some broader sort of Blizzard-y context. What about the roadmap then for this game? So here's a look at Season 5 and Season 6, as well as 7. We look at 5, we see Mischief and Magic, Quest Watch, a new time-limited event, as well as the Summer Games event returning, cinematic reveal, 5v5 mini-comp season, On Fire Returns, and Creator Workshop mode. Okay, Workshop mode sounds kind of cool. As for Quest Watch, it would remind me of Star Watch, which is actually active right now. It's a new line of skins, game mode, and new comic. I suppose you could see it being like the Star Guardian skins in League of Legends, right? Where it's a bunch of skins that can have their own little side universe lore, same as the KDA skins, stuff like that. Now, the actual mode itself is a kind of space, okay, basically it's a Star Wars inspired Overwatch thing, right? With, sort of big reskins for a bunch of characters. It has a new game mode that takes place on a reskinned Lunar Colony map that is, it's basically like a 4-point control, like attack defense mode. It does have some mechanical tweaks. You can revive other players, as we saw in past PvE Overwatch. The Empire side have turrets, there's an AI Doomfist on the Watcher side, and there's these little gravity canisters that you can basically, you shoot them and they kind of explode in a like Zarya ult, right? Now, along with that, you do of course have a bunch of new skins available. So we could basically see this Quest Watch event as being another sort of limited game mode, line of skins, that kind of thing. Then we look at Season 6 with its story missions. So with that, we could basically imagine single-player content fleshing out the future story of Overwatch. Based on Wrath of the Bride, and I have to imagine this will be a larger thing than Wrath of the Bride, I think it will probably be quite good. Also, do note, story missions, it's plural. So, look, that actually could be a decent slice of content to just jump in and play, and because it's within the context of a free-to-play live shooter, it'll be free, you can just go do it. Now, it might mean that some cosmetics and stuff you don't earn. We've still yet to see about that. But fundamentally, when I think about Overwatch 2 PvE content, it's always been really fun. So even though it's very disappointing we're not getting that big future Overwatch 2, this will actually probably be a good thing that'll be worth checking out. It's just not really the full vision that people wanted, and that's the issue. What people wanted is a new way to engage in the Overwatch universe. They don't necessarily want to be drip-fed single-player stuff within the context of a live service shooter, right? There's just different feelings in that. As well, there's Flashpoint, Hero Mastery, some other stuff. Then you look to Season 7, where you've got a new winter event, new control map, new collaboration event, which is some sort of time-limited mode, new Hero Mastery missions that are multiplayer, a rework to Roadhog, some fan-favorite modes returning, more cinematics, the Lore Codex, which seems to be a thing you sort of continually build and add to, rework to Sombra, and competitive Mastery Heroes returns. So that's the future. Then for Overwatch 2, what will I overall say? Well, what is gained from this is undoubtedly going to be a good thing for people who want to engage in Overwatch 2 as a live service, shooter. And as a live service shooter, I do think that Overwatch 2 is really fun. I do have a lot of criticisms of it as a product, but as a video game, I do think that Overwatch 2 is really fun. I know it went in that sweatier direction. That happens to be a bit more in line with my personal preferences. I've talked before in the channel about how I really enjoyed playing Overwatch 2 when it came out, even though I eye roll at some of the ways that it works. Whenever Wrath of the Bride came out, me and Matt did that for a few hours one night, and we actually really had a brilliant time. It was super fun. So the idea that every once in a while I can pop in and play some of these new story missions, that's actually pretty good to me. Because ultimately, right, as much as this is bad news, I'm not going to just sit around and be like, okay, I can see on Twitter trends that Overwatch 2 stocks are down, therefore I am going to go fully in on that and cheerlead the game staff. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to report things as I see them. And ultimately, you can have, there can be multiple positions in your head, right? Overwatch 2 PvE dying absolutely sucks. All of this stuff being sacrificed for a moonshot of an MMO is unbelievably stupid. Many very bad decisions were made across the board at Blizzard, and that BlizzCon 2019 reveal was insanely risky. I think they just completely overplayed their hand because maybe they were terrified that they just didn't have cool stuff to show, right? That they didn't want a 2018 like Diablo Immortal situation, because BlizzCon 2018 probably scared the bejesus out of them. So no wonder at BlizzCon 2019 they wanted to say Overwatch 2, Shadowlands, Diablo 4, whatever, do all their things. You can see how that big mistake happened. As much as all of that stuff is true, does it negate that hopping onto Overwatch can be a fun experience? No. And that doesn't negate the problems that Overwatch 2 has. It's in the same way I can be extremely critical of many aspects of Halo Infinite. Sometimes, will I just kick it back in the Xbox, play some Halo Infinite because Halo's fun? Yeah, I will. Right? So we can still have, nuanced opinions. We can still cover the negative aspects of games and play them the odd bit. And say, well, I still think the design is good. I still think the heroes are fun. Like, those things haven't changed. It's just this sort of more macro-scale story that is really bad, and we do have to talk about. So it's an interesting thing. Overall, that is my take on this situation. A lot of these problems, honestly, from having covered Blizzard games for such a long time, this is just emblematic of all of the downsides of Blizzard Entertainment. Because when the upsides of Blizzard Entertainment happen, yeah, you do get your Overwatch, you do get your World of Warcraft, your StarCraft 2, right? But with those wins does come a bunch of losses, a bunch of issues. Some of those issues that came out were brushed under the rug. Other ones are just projects that go into the bin and we don't hear about. And I think now we're seeing a little bit more of how the sausage is made. And maybe now that we understand how this sausage is made, other bizarre decisions from Blizzard may make sense as well. Let me know what you think. Do you play Overwatch 2? I mean, do you have fun with it? Like, what is your opinion on that? Are you one of the many people who perhaps wants to see a refresh of how the ranked mode is kind of calculated, how those ranks work? Because I see a lot of people talking about that. Anyway, let me know. You can check out this video next, and I'll see you next time.